As a historian, there are certain puzzles that just grab you and don't let go. And for me, one of the biggest is the rise of the United States. How did a country that's less than 250 years old become the most powerful nation in all of human history? It's this incredible story of luck, brilliant strategy, and just unbelievable timing.
And this is the question that scholars have been wrestling with for decades. Think about it. Most great civilizations took thousands of years to build. But the U.S. just skyrocketed from this colonial upstart to a global superpower with, historically speaking, lightning speed. So how on earth did that happen? Okay, this chart really puts things into perspective. For almost 2,000 years, the economic centers of the world were China and India. They dominated. But then, just look at that spike after 1900. Wow. The American rise wasn't just a steady climb, it was a vertical explosion. It just shows you how incredibly sudden and dramatic its arrival on the world stage really was.
So to really get our heads around this, we're going to break this puzzle down into 6 key pieces. We'll start with America's lucky beginnings, then look at how it built its economic engine, the huge role of the world wars, how it ended up as the only superpower, and finally, we'll ask, what was the price of all that power?
So let's get into that first piece of the puzzle, America's incredible starting advantages. You could almost say the U.S. was dealt a perfect hand of cards right from the very beginning. First off, historians always point to the land itself. It was a geographic jackpot. You've got 2 giant oceans acting like a fortress wall, tons of natural harbors for trade, and just endless stretches of fertile land to feed your people. Plus, it was packed with natural resources, had a river system that was basically a ready-made highway for goods, and its neighbors weren't a military threat. It's almost perfectly designed.
But here's the thing that's so crucial. The U.S. didn't have to invent the wheel. It started off as part of the British Empire, so it inherited all of Britain's advanced technology, science, and legal systems. This meant the new nation got to skip centuries of trial and error. That's a luxury no other emerging power in history ever really had.
And this quote just nails it. The U.S. basically took centuries of European knowledge and applied it to a brand new continent that was overflowing with resources. It wasn't just about having the land, it was about having the most advanced playbook in the world on how to develop it.
So, with this amazing foundation, what's the next step? Well, you build an economic machine unlike anything the world has ever seen. And to do that, you need 2 things, a whole lot of land and a single massive market.
For more than a century, the U.S. was all about aggressive expansion. It fought wars, like the one with Mexico, and made some incredibly savvy purchases, like getting Alaska from Russia. It just kept growing until it controlled a continent-sized territory, and even pushed out into the Pacific by grabbing Hawaii.
Now, all that expansion created something totally unique, a continent-sized domestic market with no barriers. Just think. At the time, Europe was this messy patchwork of competing countries with different languages, different currencies, and tariffs everywhere. But in America, you could ship goods 3,000 miles using one currency and one language with 0 hurdles. It was the perfect incubator for an industrial revolution. But look, great geography and a booming economy, that's not the whole story. The real game changer, the event that launched the U.S. from just a strong country to a global superpower, was the fact that everyone else basically destroyed themselves.
The 2 world wars just devastated the old powers of Europe. Their cities were rubble, their economies were a wreck, and their empires were falling apart. But the U.S., its homeland, was completely untouched by the fighting. In fact, its factories went into overdrive to supply the war, and it made a fortune. By the end, it was the only major industrial power left standing, and it had the atomic bomb. With that kind of power, America was in a position to literally write the rules for the New World Order. At the Bretton Woods Conference, it created a whole new global financial system, made the U.S. dollar the world's main currency, and led the charge in creating institutions like the United Nations and the World Bank.
All right, so that brings us to the final chapter in America's rise. A nearly 50-year struggle against its only remaining rival for global dominance, the Soviet Union.
So, the main strategy for the U.S. during this whole period was something called containment. The goal was simple: stop the spread of communism anywhere and everywhere. And to do that, the U.S. had to build this massive, permanent, worldwide network of alliances and military bases.
And here's the thing that's so important to understand. That massive military infrastructure that was built to fight the Cold War, it never went away. This global footprint, with over 800 bases in more than 70 countries, is still a core part of American power today.
And then, in 1991, after this long, drawn-out struggle, the Soviet Union just collapsed. The Cold War was over, and for the first time in modern history, there was only one superpower left. The United States stood completely alone at the top of the world.
But this is where the story gets really complicated, because we have to talk about the final part of this puzzle. What was the domestic cost of building and maintaining that global dominance? What is the price you pay for being number one?
Well, for one thing, it's incredibly expensive. Just look at this chart. The U.S. spends about 37% of the entire world's military budget. That's more than many of the next top countries combined. That is a staggering amount of money and resources being used to project power all over the globe.
And this brings us to this central paradox of modern America. While it projects this incredible power abroad, the U.S. faces some really serious challenges at home that make it stand out from other developed nations. Wealth inequality is off the charts. College costs are astronomical, and levels of violence are dramatically higher. It really makes you wonder where the nation's priorities and resources are focused.
And so that leaves us with this final, really tough question. It forces us to ask what the true definition of a successful nation even is. Is it about global military and economic dominance, or is it about the health, safety, and prosperity of its own citizens? And is it even possible for a country to truly have both?